Greetings and welcome to the Culture Ward, where we dissect and dismantle pop culture in all its forms. Many of you will likely remember that during the Biden administration, there seemed to be a concerted effort on the part of the government and media to stifle debate on certain issues. Specifically, anyone questioning the mainstream narrative on a certain virus and certain medications were seemingly silenced, be it on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, or elsewhere. Likewise, for anyone discussing the integrity of the 2020 election, especially in the wake of the January 6, 2021 Capitol protest. Democrats and some establishment Republicans supported the deplatforming of these voices, citing, quote, misinformation and disinformation as a valid reason to censor people on the internet. And of course, these same establishment hacks assured us that it wasn't a First Amendment violation because it was private companies that were doing all the censorship. Well, it turns out that these private companies may not have been acting alone. Guess who else was involved? Before we begin, please take a second to hit that subscribe button and help us to grow the channel. As always, it really means a lot to us. And don't forget to like and share the video if you enjoy the content. Now, without further ado, let's get into it. So, I don't want to jump two-footed into politics on this channel. That was never my intention here. So, I'm not going to go into too much depth about the political turmoil surrounding issues like COVID and the 2020 election, among other things. Suffice it to say, there have been some rather controversial topics on display in the American discourse over recent years. Basically, since about 2015, the rhetoric on both sides of the political divide has been pretty insanely divisive. And I choose not to get involved in the merits of these topics on my pop culture channel. In any event, though, the divisive rhetoric did seem to reach a peak around 2020, first with COVID and later with that year's presidential election and the time leading up to it. Like, remember Hunter Biden's laptop story, for instance? You may recall that some people were calling for draconian measures to force people to take a certain pharmaceutical product, threatening legal action, loss of jobs, and even outright banishment from society for anyone who resisted.
People who refuse to accept vaccines, I think the right response for them is to insist that they be isolated.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? F*** them, f*** their freedom.
Likewise, following the election in 2020, some people weren't particularly pleased with the results. And there were some allegations of unfairness in the process and in the media. And there was even this big event at the U.S. Capitol during the first week of January 2021, if anyone recalls. I'm just saying, folks were unhappy. So while one side claimed to be presenting the truth, such as about various medical treatments and election integrity and the January 6th riots, they also claimed that the other side was spreading mis- and disinformation. Remember those terms? Donald Trump, during his first bid for the presidency, kind of famously called out fake news whenever there was unfavorable press.
Not, can you give us a chance?
Your organization
you are attacking our category.
You are fake news.
Sir, it's called fake news.
I don't like watching fake news.
Fake news.
And I mean, he wasn't totally wrong either. Well, the other side kind of co-opted that concept and started calling anything that disagreed with their position misinformation and disinformation, frequently citing Russian disinformation.
Obvious disinformation.
It is so obviously a Russian operation.
So obviously disinformation.
So obviously a Russian plot.
Russian disinformation.
Disinformation campaign.
And then there was this push, supported by politicians, media personalities, and Hollywood celebrities alike, to start limiting the ability of people to spread misinformation online or in the press. They talked openly and candidly about censorship, claiming that the First Amendment doesn't protect against lies. They even proposed setting up a government agency literally called the Ministry of Truth in order to dictate what information could be communicated. It was all very Orwellian. And we all saw with our own eyes that the powers that controlled the airwaves, be it cable news, internet chat rooms, or social media, actually seemed to be implementing this policy. If anyone had an opinion different than the mainstream narrative, or even asked questions about that narrative, they were seemingly silenced. This happened with pandemic policy, election integrity, Hunter Biden's laptop story, and other, quote, conspiracy theories that turned out to be true. People were banned from Twitter, suspended from YouTube, and removed from Facebook. And the people that were supportive of the establishment narrative and hostile to free speech and open debate defended these banishments, invoking the private enterprise defense. You know, these companies are private enterprises and the First Amendment doesn't apply to them. They can ban people for violating their own company policies, terms of service, or for any reason that affects their profitability, right?
How much of a violation is this of free speech?
Yes. Well, as you know, the First Amendment doesn't apply to private companies.
And while there is admittedly some merit to that argument in the abstract, there's obviously a serious conversation to be had about platforms, such as large social media apps, that have essentially replaced the town square as centers of public debate. It's a conversation we need to have if the First Amendment is going to mean anything heading into the future. Do we have free speech if the only places people can actually be heard are privately owned spaces that aren't beholden to the Constitution? Well, saving that argument for another day, there inevitably came a time when it seemed like this throttling of speech on the internet wasn't a purely private decision. It seemed at least that there was some collusion between the social media companies and the government. And despite the gnashing of teeth and rending of garments from the establishment screaming that no such thing was happening, the Twitter files kind of confirmed it, at least as it concerns Twitter. When Elon Musk purchased the social media giant, which he renamed X for some reason, he released thousands of documents showing that government officials had, in fact, pressured Twitter to censor content. Well, now we have proof that the same thing happened with Google and its rather popular platform, YouTube. Alright, so this is an article that was published in the Judiciary Committee for the House of Representatives website. It's titled, Google to Reinstate Banned YouTube Accounts Censored for Political Speech. Google vowed on Tuesday to offer YouTube accounts that were permanently banned for political speech the ability to be reinstated, and the big tech giant admitted that it once faced pressure from the Biden administration to remove content about COVID-19. So Google detailed its remarkable shift in a document that a lawyer for the company provided to the House Judiciary Committee. Alright, the new policy from Google, also known by its parent company Alphabet, could affect both average users and well-known figures like FBI Deputy Director Dan Bongino, White House counterterrorism chief Sebastian Gorka, and War Room podcast host Steve Bannon, all of whom were permanently banned in recent years from COVID-19 or election-related content. Quote, reflecting the company's commitment to free expression, YouTube will provide an opportunity for all creators to rejoin the platform if the company terminated their channels for repeated violations of COVID-19 and elections integrity policies that are no longer in effect. Alright, so it goes on to say Bongino ended his conservative radio show when he joined the administration this year. He has attributed his popularity on that platform to permanently losing his YouTube account in 2022. YouTube permanently banned Bongino, who had one of the most followed accounts on the platform, for spreading what it said was COVID-19 misinformation about masks. The document from Google also noted that YouTube, quote, values conservative voices on its platform and acknowledges that the creators, quote, have extensive reach and play an important role in civic discourse. Right. The document included a section about the Biden administration and said White House officials at the time pushed Google behind the scenes to remove perceived misinformation related to COVID-19. Senior Biden administration officials, including White House officials, conducted repeated and sustained outreach to Alphabet and pressed the company regarding certain user-generated content related to the COVID-19 pandemic that did not violate its policies. The administration, quote, created a political atmosphere that sought to influence the actions of platforms based on their concerns regarding misinformation. Alright, so Google's revelations came in response to a years-long Republican-led investigation by the committee into big tech companies, including Google, that censored and suppressed content on their platforms related to COVID-19, the 2020 election, and Hunter Biden. YouTube's posture follows Meta similarly shifting last year toward denouncing the Biden administration's pressure tactics and welcoming more voices onto its platform. Meta revealed at the time that it was doing away with third-party fact-checkers. YouTube has not used outside fact-checkers and vowed that it will not empower fact-checkers to take action on or label content on the platform. So, parallel to the congressional investigations was a lawsuit brought by 2 Republican attorneys general over social media censorship. Discovery in that case largely mirrored what the committee uncovered. The Supreme Court ultimately did not decide on the merits of the case, Murphy versus Missouri, and instead found that the plaintiffs lacked standing to bring it. but the lower courts had largely sided with the plaintiffs, including a judge who found the federal government seemed to have, quote, assumed a role similar to an Orwellian Ministry of Truth. The High Court's decision disappointed Republicans who had hoped for a landmark ruling that social media companies' censorship practices violate the First Amendment. The case also explored jawboning, which involves the government pressuring private companies to censor their speech, essentially using implied threats of regulatory action or some other action against companies to get what they want. The term jawboning has resurfaced in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death after ABC late-night host Jimmy Kimmel suggested on his show that the suspect, Tyler Robinson, was a member of the MAGA gang. Authorities have said Robinson felt Kirk spread hate and that he engraved his bullet casings with gamer-inspired anti-fascist messaging. Right, so concerns with jawboning arose because Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr made a veiled threat about Kimmel's remarks ahead of ABC pulling him off air. The FCC has regulatory authority over broadcasting networks, including ABC, but still must abide by the First Amendment. So what does all this mean? Well, according to Google, there's nothing to worry about. They're sorry and it won't happen again. And it was all that big bad Biden's fault anyway. And according to the political and Hollywood establishment, it's not a big deal anyway. Biden didn't force them to censor, he just made recommendations. So there was no constitutional violation at all. And again, there is, admittedly, some merit to this argument in the abstract. But in reality, every suggestion by the government, from the intelligence community to the president himself, carries with it implicit power to enforce those recommendations. Government regulatory agencies have power to limit operations. Fines and regulations can cause trouble for media companies. And basically, recommendations by the CIA are really threats of legal action if the recommendations aren't followed. In other words, this absolutely was a constitutional violation.
If it walks like a duck, that's all I'm saying.
The fuck's that supposed to mean?
If it walks like a duck, it's either a duck or a duck wearing some type of human costume. I don't know.
And we should be screaming our heads off about it. There needs to be an investigation, and there needs to be repercussions for the people involved, and restitution to those who were negatively affected. What's most frustrating is that the same people trying to brush this off as innocuous and legal were absolutely outraged when Disney and ABC temporarily suspended Jimmy Kimmel after he made false claims about the Charlie Kirk incident on network television, claiming it was an attempt by Trump to eliminate free speech. And while I do agree, the statements made by the FCC chairman on a popular podcast were totally inappropriate and probably violate the law. But ABC's decision was completely their own. At worst, you can argue that it was no worse than what the Biden administration was doing to Google and Twitter and Facebook, but you'd be wrong. What Biden was doing was far worse, if only because it was so insidious, secretive, and sustained. Now, my political beliefs are pretty eclectic, and I will do my best to keep them to myself for the most part on this channel. But one thing you will hear me repeatedly assert is my belief in free speech and the First Amendment. The entire Bill of Rights is extremely important to our democracy, but it was the First Amendment that set us apart from every other democracy in the world, and still does. Freedom of speech, association, expression, press, and religion, more than anything else, is what makes America the greatest nation in the history of civilization, and any deviation from that ideal risks ruining the whole damn thing. So we must protect these rights jealously and ferociously. Don't let anyone get away with abridging these rights, Democrat or Republican, private or public. In other words, this is not a nothing burger. It's an important admission and a terrifying development. Don't let this just get swept under the rug. Keep talking about it. Call your congressman, demand investigations and prosecutions. Don't let our government get away with it now or ever again. Use your First Amendment rights to make noise, raise hell, and demand justice. That's what it's there for. So what do you think? Were you surprised that Google was being pressured by the Biden administration to censor speech? Is there anything I missed or got wrong? Join the conversation in the comments below. As always, thank you so much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Bye for now. We hope to see you next time in the Culture Wars.